Hello, everybody. I'm Brian Heisenbottle,
And I'm Mike Carlson.
and welcome to The View from the U.
Okay, Brian, before we get started with our games, I'd like to talk about the Heisman. Last week we saw a lot of people go down. Johnny Manziel lost to Auburn, Teddy Bridgewater lost to UCF, and Taj Boyd lost to Florida State. And if you're asking me, I think all three of those guys should no longer be in Heisman contention because they weren't able to get that signature win that all the Heisman voters talk about, where you seal the deal, you solidify that intangible aspect of your game. And so I think right now it's down to a two-horse race. You're looking at two guys, Marcus Mariota of the Oregon Ducks and famous Jameis Winston, my favorite player in all of college football. So looking at these two guys, they're two actually very different yet very similar players. You look at Winston, he's a freshman and excels at what he does. I mean, for a freshman, this guy has tremendous leadership. ESPN showed a lot of clips of him in the locker room kind of rallying the troops and getting those guys together, and I think it was kind of weird to see a freshman do that, but it shows great leadership skills and the leadership that he has. And then you're looking at a guy like Mariota. He's on his way out of college football, but this guy's had a great career. And of course, when you're in the Oregon Ducks type of offense, you're going to score a lot of points. You're going to have a lot of touchdowns. But I think Mariota's special because he can run, he can pass so well. And in the past, we haven't seen a lot of Oregon quarterbacks that are really good passers. So in comparison, Winston and Mariota they're both very mobile, but whereas Winston will not look to run, whereas Winston will pass before he looks to run, and Mariota will run before he looks to pass. I think that's where those two kind of separate. But as of right now, unless anyone just totally, blows it out of the water these next couple weeks in college football, or if a guy like Johnny Manziel comes back into the race, it's down to these two guys essentially. I mean, both two great quarterbacks, both guys who are going to put up a lot of points, but it's just interesting to see the one is the rising freshman and the other is the junior who's on his way out.
Yeah, I definitely agree, Mike. And you talk about people falling off the map. Manziel, I know he was on the board. He's off. Another guy who I thought was on, Aaron Murray. He's such a good quarterback, and even though it's a sin as a Georgia Tech fan, I really did want him to win. But you just can't do that when you're facing injuries and your team's losing, your defense doesn't stand up. That all factors into it. And, both Florida State and Oregon, they're just clicking now, and it's just making it that much easier for Mariota and Winston to make a strong Heisman campaign.
And yeah, you would look at a lot of those Heisman voters. They look at your stats, but they also, being a Heisman winner is about the intangible part of the game. It's about, bringing your team back from 2 touchdowns down in the fourth quarter, and when you only have 2 drives to go. It's about winning those close games, winning the ones where it matters. And I think that when you compare Manziel to Mariota and Winston, I don't see a lot of that intangible. He almost brought Texas A&M back against Alabama, and then he almost did the same against Auburn, and with a banged up right shoulder too. But I think that you got to have that intangible. You got to have that win because it's just something it can only help your case.
Yeah, going to the whole teams as a whole with my top 25 bit, there are 3 main groups I want to focus on. The first is the top 5. We'll just throw away Alabama because they've really done nothing to convince me that they're not the number 1 team in the nation. And I'm very happy with how they put Florida State as number 2 and Oregon as number 3. Because if you compare offenses, if you compare Winston and Mariota, it's just going to be a very two-sided argument. But if you look at the defenses, Oregon gave up more points against a struggling Washington State team than Florida State did against Clemson. And that speaks very loud for these teams. They're such big programs and such high-powered offenses that it really comes down to how good is your your lesser half. Moving on, I'm relieved to see that Ohio State is still at number 4. I know they're a great team, but I do not think they're a national championship team. All props to Braxton Miller. He's just not a Jameis Winston. He's not a Marcus Mariota. He's not a Johnny Manziel. And nor is Kenny Guyton, who is actually a good quarterback, and I'm excited to see him play later in his career. And then finally, Mizzou, the big surprise team. They're ranked number 5, which I don't think anyone could have predicted. I really do think this is a proper spot for them because they have proved time and time again that they are the best team in that portion of the SEC. Whether they can beat Bama in the SEC championship, where they probably will play, I'm not sure, but I do think that's a very appropriate rank for a very good team. So, moving on, after Louisville's upset, we now have University of Central Florida in the top 25. What we also have is the University of Florida not in the top 25. So, what the BCS is getting at there is that the University of Central Florida is a better team than the University of Florida, which I can't buy. Florida's been playing at a way higher competition level. I mean, yeah, they were weak against Mizzou, but I mean, Mizzou's a good team, I've just said, and I'm just not sold on having those small conference teams be ahead of those big SEC teams. So finally, I want to talk about the SEC. Auburn, very excited about them winning. I think they've got a really great high-powered offense that put up big numbers against the A&M defense last week. But I do think number 11 is generous. They're definitely a good team and definitely a top 15 team. LSU, this is exactly where I thought they would fall, or where I wanted them to fall, because, well, they are a very good team. Zach Menberger is not the top 15 quarterback. He's not really a top 15 quarterback through my eyes. I mean, he's very much what he was at University of Georgia. He's second best to Aaron Murray, and at a program like LSU, I mean, props to everything else they have. You know, Les Miles, great coach, but Zach Mettenberger is not the quarterback to lead the team or to give the team a top 10 rank. And then finally, Ole Miss. I mean, they've had a very tough stretch. They might have been 1-3, but they almost upset A&M, and they upset LSU, and the teams they've lost to are all ranked teams. So, I mean, these guys have proven that while they may have had a bad week, they're a really good team, and I'd really like to see them back in the top 25, despite their record. So right now I'm going to pitch it back to Mike for the call on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish and the USC Trojans, as well as the call on the Clemson Tigers and the FSU Seminoles. So Mike, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. I'm not really going to say a lot about Notre Dame because there really isn't a lot to say. You're looking at a team that won 14-10 against USC. Tommy Rees, he did well enough, I mean, in my mind, but he's just not that explosive quarterback that Everett Golson was last year for the Irish. This guy's not an athlete. He's not a playmaker. And then you have Cody Kessler on the other side for USC. This guy's a good quarterback. He's still growing. He's a freshman, or he's an underclassman at USC. So I think he kind of deserves a break. But Rees and this Notre Dame offense, they've just been sputtering of late. And there's not really a lot to say in this game, Brian, except for that, Notre Dame played better than USC did. And that's about it. These two teams have drastically, underperformed this year. Huge expectations going into this season, and one team has their coach fired and has replaced their quarterback already. The other team lost their quarterback last year. Just can't seem to find that rhythm that they had last year in this game. So really, in summation, both teams didn't really live up to expectations. In fact, my dad was talking to me on Sunday. He was wondering. He's like, USC played Notre Dame. He was shocked that didn't get enough pub. And I think that kind of question that USC played Notre Dame is kind of just typifies this game because it was such an under the radar matchup. And you're looking at the past decade. It's been a prime time college football matchup. So I think both of these teams, I wouldn't call it a rebuilding year. I would just call it a year that hasn't lived up to expectations of late. And, now on to Florida State and Clemson. Brian, you and me were talking about this game all week, and then you texted me updates during the game while I was at a Chinese restaurant eating and watching the game at the same time. I had to sneak a peek at the TV every once in a while. But you're looking at just a rock-solid Florida State team. There aren't a lot of teams out there that I could say could beat Alabama in a national title game. But I would definitely throw Florida State into that category because of the guy at the helm of the offense, Jameis Winston. This quarterback is the kind of quarterback who can cause fits for Nick Saban. You're looking at Johnny Manziel, kind of that athletic quarterback, and he upset Alabama last year. And then I think Jameis Winston I kind of want to call him Manziel 2.0 because he's just so athletic. But he's a better thrower down the field, and he's got so many good wide receivers. This he's a treat to watch. But one part I don't think that gets a lot of credit is this Florida State defense. They're a solid unit. There's a couple guys on the edges in the secondary that have been exceptional players for this team. But this is just a team of rock-solid football players who know what they're doing. And I think if you're going to give any team trouble, especially Alabama, you have to beat them on the defensive side of the ball. You have to make their offense make plays because as of right now, A.J. McCarron, he hasn't been challenged at all this year. I mean, he with relative ease has been able to, pick apart a lot of these SEC opponents. But I think Florida State with a pretty advanced secondary and a really great front seven can do a lot of damage against Alabama. And Taj Boyd he was the talk of the town. They were all convinced that this guy was just going to pound Florida State. He's a great quarterback, and he's with him and Teddy Bridgewater are the consensus number one picks in this April's upcoming draft. But I think that this Florida State defense managed to stop him somehow. So in summation, I think the only way you can beat Alabama is with a rock-solid quarterback. The SEC is strong in quarterbacks, but they're not strong in athletic quarterbacks. They're strong in quarterbacks that are guys who will stay in the pocket, guys who will step up and look downfield. Whereas I think Winston, there's an element of chaos about him that Nick Saban's defense can't account for. So in summation, I think this vaults Jameis Winston way ahead of Marcus Mariota in the Heisman, and I see a really bright future for this guy.
Well, Jameis Winston, we're looking at a guy who can make us very mad our first 2 years at college when we're in there. Yeah. So my game this week was Stanford versus UCLA. I'm dressed to the nines in my Stanford gear to celebrate them being back in the top 10. But this game, it was really more about what they didn't do rather than what they did. Because, when you're looking into the game, big names are coming up, Tyler Gaffney, Kevin Hogan, Brett Hundley, and it really wasn't an example of these offensive powerhouses that were expected. If you talk about starting with special teams, the punters were horrible, gave both teams great field position consistently, which, isn't good from either side. But if you look at the score, it really didn't have much of an effect. Looking at UCLA, Brett Hundley there was so much press coming into him about how well he was doing early in the season. But what Stanford did is they got pressure to him, and they made him feel uncomfortable, and that really threw him off way more than I expected, and I bet way more than other people expected too, because he really had sort of a lackluster game compared to the other performances he's put on this season. And that's really at the Stanford rushing attack ruled over the UCLA defense. And switching sides now, Kevin Hogan, he might have racked up big yards. He had 200-plus yards, but he was not good in the clutch. The only passing touchdown he had was a great grab by Cody Whitfield, which I don't know if you saw. Caught it here, fell down, and then scooped it in like that, which is an amazing catch. I definitely recommend you guys going and looking it up because I basically jumped out of my seat. I was so excited to see that. But aside from that, Tyler Gaffney was really the only source of offense for the Stanford team. He got 171 yards in both the Stanford rushing touchdowns, and when you're talking about a team where Kevin Hogan can be shaky week after week after week, you really need Gaffney to come in and stand up week after week to keep them in that top 10 ranking. So UCLA lost because they could not give Hundley the protection to be the great quarterback that we all know he can be. And Stanford won because because of the opposite. They prohibited Hundley from making those huge throws because there were not a lot of points scored. And if Hundley had the time to step up in the pocket and make good throws, then we could have easily seen just a crushing defeat of the Stanford team. So now I'm going to bring Mike back on. Hey, Mike?
Okay, Brian. So, like you said, Brett Hundley, I really love this. I think he's a great quarterback just in the sense that I think he's very underrated. I don't think he gets enough pub at UCLA. And you bring up a great point with Hogan. I've covered the last couple Stanford games, and I haven't seen a lot of the greatness out of Hogan that I expected. You go to Stanford, you're a smart person, but I haven't seen those football smarts come out yet. I haven't seen that intelligent athlete who's going to make great plays down the field yet. And last year he really did. He did a great job. He led him to a Rose Bowl, and he won the Rose Bowl. That's as great as you can get at the Pac-12 level. But this year it's been very underwhelming, been very wishy-washy. I'm kind of just hoping that it's a little bit of a slump in there because I really like this quarterback. He's no Andrew Luck, but I think he's one of the next best options.
Yeah, I mean it's always a tough act to follow. Andrew Luck, such a good player. I mean, really just there's really not much to say. He was the face of the Stanford team, and Kevin Hogan. I can understand if he wasn't quite as good as Luck because he's not going to be a number one overall pick. But you're talking about a Stanford team that has been consistently good, and he's sort of like, I don't know how to put him. He just didn't live up to the expectation that you have for a quarterback at Stanford because I mean, you if you go to Stanford, you want to see a Jameis Winston type character, a quarterback who leads the offense, and it's really the running backs that are doing it this year, and that's something you don't really often see from a Stanford team.
Exactly, and I think that this is a Stanford squad that they've shown flashes of greatness and flashes of being a great team, but they're not quite there yet. So why don't you tell the viewers what game you're going to be covering here in week 9 of this college football season?
All right, so next week I'm going to a bit of a smaller division. I'm going into the Mountain West as Boise State takes on BYU. And I mean, these are two programs, a lot smaller program. You've seen us cover the big, SEC, ACC, Pac-12 schools, but I mean, BYU, they've been just fantastic. I was very upset when they beat Georgia Tech, only to find out that they have just had such a great season so far. And you're talking about a Boise State team who is really dominant in the Mountain West Conference. Up there with Fresno State is one of the teams that really does match up with the high division teams. Because when you think of the Mountain West, you think Hawaii, Colorado State, Nevada, not big name schools, but I mean Boise State, they've been getting it done consistently in the last few years. So, Mike, what game are you going to be covering?
I am going to be covering, now Brian, I've talked about this team already once this year. The Baylor Bears face off against the KU Jayhawks. And this is kind of a matchup that's off the beaten path a little bit. I think this Baylor team is extremely underrated. I think if I told you that they were the number 8 team in the nation right now, you'd be surprised because they are. This is a Baylor squad that, I mean, since the exit of Robert Griffin III and that really great season that he had, has been under the radar. But this year, they score a lot of points, and I think that's what's really cool about them is I kind of call them Oregon South because they have new uniforms every week. They're mixing it up. They got gold helmets one week, silver platinum helmets the other week, and crazy uniform combinations. And they score a lot of points. They score a ton of points. So I'm going to predict a blowout against Kansas because I think this Baylor team is rolling right now. And I think if they're undefeated, they make a great case not to play in the national championship, but to play in one of those premier bowls. And I think that right now the BCS has a huge problem on their hand. You have Alabama, Florida State, Ohio State, Oregon. You have 4 teams that are undefeated. Then you're looking at Mizzou, undefeated. Looking at Baylor, they're undefeated right now and rising. Brian, that's 7 undefeated teams.
Yeah.
And last time I checked, only 2 teams can play for the national title. So I think that the BCS, and it's last year, which is only fitting, that they have a huge problem on their hand. And I think it's going to be great to watch these next couple weeks just to see how that shakes out.
Yeah, the Baylor Bears, they don't get the great press because I really think that the Big 12 has been lacking press ever since the exit of Vince Young, because I guess Colt McCoy too, but if you look at it, Oklahoma's really been the only team that's been up there consistently, but they're sort of like, yeah, I'll make a good bowl and then just throw them somewhere in the top 15, and they don't really get the prestigious rankings you get to the other divisions. But I mean, Baylor is proving them wrong and proving them wrong hard. I mean, you basically covered all a ton of points, and I'd like to see how this Kansas team fares because I haven't seen a lot of them, but they're gonna have their hands full with this Baylor offense.
Yeah, and it's definitely going to be cool to look at how the BCS is going to manage all this craziness. Because normally at this point in the season, there are there's 2 guys, there's 2 teams, there's 2 horses that are right there, and they're going to be there the rest of the way. But right now, it's up in the air. I mean, I firmly believe that Alabama is just going to stay number 1 just because Nick Saban he's a robot. He's Mr. Consistent over there at Tuscaloosa. But I think that whoever plays Alabama, I think that's going to be interesting, and the BCS can get itself in a pretty big mess if not only with the fans but with the college, with their respective college programs. Because if you expect to go undefeated and make a national title, you don't expect to go undefeated and end up at the Discount Double Check Bowl, State Farm Discount Double Check Bowl. So I think it's going to be just one of those interesting things to see how it shakes out. And you know what? I'm rooting for Florida State. My guy Jameis Winston, he's definitely my favorite player right now.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for watching. Please click like, favorite, and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah. Love you lots, Jameis Winston. You're awesome.